Okay, this is Subcommittee Chairman Mike McCoo calling to order the February 7th, 2022 meeting of the School Building Committee Land Assessment Subcommittee. It is 4:01 p.m. and our first order of business is testing the land assessment matrix on current school properties. I would like to point out that Mr. Pellman has joined us from the consulting group, and he has offered to contribute some wisdom on this process so that we can get started off in the right direction. So we will certainly take some input from him. And Mr. Pellman, for your edification, we have a spreadsheet, just a Excel spreadsheet that we have worked on, and basically took criteria that was from the state as well as our own criteria, and attempted to build a couple different pages. One is essentially just to gather the information about a parcel, including the parcels the schools sit on right now. And another page is to try to develop some scoring. So with that introduction, I think we'll get into it. I'm going to do a screen share. I don't know if you have any comment you want to make while I'm doing the screen share.
The only comment I would have is that I had forwarded to Catherine. She had provided a copy of the spreadsheet, and I added a few suggested criteria, that you might want to include.
Okay, so Catherine, maybe it makes better sense. Did I do a sound check with you, Catherine? I think I did, right?
Yeah, I actually haven't had a chance to look at what Scott sent over.
Okay.
So did you edit it in that email, Scott?
No, I added it on the bottom of the site evaluation criteria. I just added a few suggestions, such as cost of land, centrally located, potential loss of tax revenue, allows for expansion, site development costs, suitable for geothermal, and can the site meet the ed spec requirements, which I know you're still going to be developing those requirements, so there's no metric to really assign to that one at this point.
Okay. I think some of that we had at least intended to capture in the form, but maybe had not written it properly or clearly. So it'll be good to boil in that stuff that you brought along. So in that case, do you have the modified one handy? Would you do a screen share of that?
Certainly.
You can look at it.
I actually have it here if you want me to share it. I just opened it.
Whoever wants to share it is fine.
It says host disabled participant screen sharing.
Well, let's see if the host can fix that.
I can email it to you if you want.
Hang on. Try that.
So it looks like this bottom piece
Yes.
here. So this is our spreadsheet.
Yep.
Okay. Okay. So members of the committee, are there any, I know we've talked about this form quite a bit already. Do you have any other comments before we sort of play with it a little bit? We can start off by trying out the center school and hall school properties that we know some information about.
Mike, your microphone seems to be flaky a little bit. I heard some funny noise. The only thing I sent you an email. I sent everyone an email about one feature factor that I thought should be included, and that was response time for emergency services.
Right. Yep. And that was that gave me some food for thought and got me actually thinking, because I know the emergency services in town and our mutual aid. That got me kind of thinking about that.
I'm thinking
So
of
we
first
would-
responders primarily.
Yes. So you're thinking about the ambulance.
Ambulance and or law enforcement.
Oh, yeah, good point. So hang on, I'm just catching up on some notes here. Pardon me. All right, I've added my notes here, Ralph, to add in consideration for the emergency services. And I don't know where that background sound's coming from. It's not here in my house, but I do hear it when I talk sometimes.
I don't have any other thoughts. I think it's worth including all of those.
Okay. All right. So you can see that I started column B and C, parcel 1 and 2, just to give us a place to start with Hall and Center School. So I don't think, so should we start on site evaluation or should we do parcel details first? Plug in the details we know about the parcel. All right. So parcel 1, I didn't carry the titles over, did I? But parcel 1 was Hall School, right?
Correct. Parcel 2 was center.
Okay.
You want to start with Hall?
Yeah, let's start with Hall. You know the gross acreage, right, Ralph?
Well, give me a second. I can tell you, I got to add it up again.
Aren't
Mike, do you
these,
want
can
me
I
to
just,
stop?
can I just suggest, are these factual things, the things that Colliers could do for us? I mean, I don't want to sit here and just, say, well, how many acres is it? Let's get into the meat if we're gonna do that.
Okay, so what are you thinking? Where's the meat that you want to get right to?
Well, these things are all, to me, these are like factual, these are like, okay,
Right.
let's look up these things. These are like the ones that are prerequisites. Am I right?
Well, it's just gathering the information. So parcel details was gathering the information about the site, the general information, like you said, the factual stuff. And then the site evaluation page was really about sort of plugging that into a more, how does it affect our project?
Right.
Or our intent. And we certainly don't have to, I wouldn't imagine we would spend all our meetings plugging this stuff in necessarily. The only reason for trying it today was to see if it worked. But if you have a better way to go, please feel free to suggest it.
I guess I don't at this point, if we don't have it in front of us yet. I feel like that could be done outside of a meeting to fill in acreage and fill in those details. But here we are. So let's, however you think we can best get through this, that's fine.
Okay. Any other suggestions on that? I mean, we could administratively outside of a meeting plug as many of these details as we can get. For example, I've been going through, as I said before, the list of all of the town-owned parcels. And it's pretty easy to eliminate a lot of the town-owned parcels because a lot of them are things like 1.2 acres or deeded for drainage for wetlands, things like that. So we certainly could focus our work. So
Can I
Go
just
ahead.
add a comment on that?
Of course.
If it's like 1 or 2 acres, I think, the assumption would be, okay, that's clearly not enough for a site, a school site. But I think if it was in combination with multiple sites, for example, let's say there was a 10 acre site and then right next to it, there was a 1.2 site and then right next to that. So if, I don't know that we want to rule it out just on the basis of the acreage. We should actually see how it orients with other properties. I mean, if they're totally separate, then that makes sense to eliminate them, but
Yeah.
I think we should just at least ask the question, are they sharing a property line with another parcel? That's all.
Yeah, I think that's a good point, and that matters, particularly in the example of Hall School, where there are parcels adjacent to Hall School that are actually for sale right now too.
Exactly.
So, okay, so,
Do you want me to stop sharing this and you can pull up the actual spreadsheet and maybe we can plug in some data as we're talking?
well, I guess that's a question of what's the right path for us to take today in our meeting right now. You know, so the idea is to do something to get us rolling. What's the best way to get us rolling? My thought was we test the spreadsheet a little bit on a piece of property we know some information about. And then hopefully in the next, you know, couple of weeks, maybe we start getting to whether where we can walk properties, or we can at least plug in more data. You know, I can identify, I have a list of parcels already written down of town-owned parcels. I could, outside of a meeting, plug in information there too. I just want to get us, I want to find a way for us to get some momentum.
Well, that would be my suggestion, is to open up the Excel spreadsheet and just start plugging away. I can't, I don't think I can edit this one. No, I can't edit this one, but
Okay.
let me see if I can edit it. And that would be my suggestion, is to open up an editable one and let's
Yep.
start plugging in some information that we know. And then I don't know, unless Scott has another suggestion.
Yeah, my only suggestion might be, I mean, you know, you've got the known quantities or entities in the Hall and the center school sites. And it's very interesting that you've got potentially some adjacent parcels for Hall Memorial. So, you know, I think almost starting with some overall site plans to see what that does. And then I had sent, also I'd sent to Catherine, a higher level, sort of a very simple, and I think I shared this with Phil in the committee last May, but just a much higher level site evaluation format to, you know, again, if you've identified a number of potentially new parcels, it may be a way to very quickly prioritize some of those and pull some of those off the, you know, for consideration. And, you know, and then you can start diving in a little bit more into the details of, you know, picking one or two and then comparing them as you have with the format you have set up for Hall and center schools. So yeah, thank you, Catherine. This is one where in a lot of times what we do is you put in the information you have and then you kind of color code. You see very, very quickly, very graphically, it starts showing, you know, rating those areas on how they achieve your, you know, from a cost standpoint, you know, are there any wetlands, you know, potential loss of revenue. Now, if it's only town land that you're talking about at the moment, that's easy because it's town-owned land. There are a lot of cases where we'll also look at privately owned parcels that may be for sale. So you need to evaluate, you know, is it in an industrial zone or a commercial zone where, you know, if developed, is there a potential loss, you know, of town revenue by developing that parcel? So those types of things need to be evaluated. You got to be a little bit more careful though when talking about public or privately owned parcels because you don't want your negotiations to happen out in a public forum. So, you know, anytime you're considering a privately owned parcel, you need to really keep that one pretty close to the vest. And, you know, just keep that evaluation more within a group like this, you know, a subgroup of the full committee.
And Scott, I think that's how we came up with parcel A, B, C, for that very reason.
Right.
Right, and that's another reason we're talking only about town-owned parcels today, because we don't have to worry about going into executive session.
Mhm.
Just to sort of get our feet wet with making the assessments here. So your thought maybe, Scott, is that we've made it too complicated for the first go around. You're thinking maybe we could use a little bit higher level to make our first sweep?
Yeah, that's usually the way we do it, is do it a little bit higher level in the first sweep, and it, may very quickly on that high level approach, you can get to the result a little bit faster and weed out, the things that really shouldn't be considered versus spending a lot of time on diving into some more of the granular detail on them. Is there a town map or something with sort of the tax assessor sheets or some of the parcels? How have you organized your initial thought on looking at the town parcels? Was that something the town planner provided, or?
So what was done in the past was Phil had worked with the land use office and they had pulled a list. They can search within the software by owner. They pulled a list of town-owned parcels. And we can have access to that again. I just went into the online GIS mapping and searched the same way by the town, by the owner, and made a list from that with the information there. And that was only because there were, since Phil had made the list, there were some changes in property. So that was where we developed the town list from. And then, and that right now is still in handwritten format right now in my notepad here. So that's as far as it had gotten. We have discussed and we are aware just from being around town of other things in the privately owned sphere. And actually we did have one executive session where we walked a piece of property months ago. And that was before we had this matrix to work with. And that property was already on the market and has since sold.
Actually, it's still pending.
Well, right. Yeah, it has a pending offer on it, apparently. Yeah. Ralph or Gary, you have any guidance on what direction you think you'd like us to start moving here?
I'd like to see what the ed specs are going to require for various things. We're going to need parking. We're going to need outdoor space. We're going to need some idea of the square footage of the building. The footprint can be cut in half or into thirds, depending on whether we go 1, 2, or 3 stories. That, of course, is going to be partly influenced by the topography of the site. So, yes, some of this may be mundane work, but if we don't do it, where are we going to get?
Okay.
I mean, we know that we're not going to get reimbursed for land acquisition for anything greater than 19 acres.
Correct. And, what we've done in the past when we've had larger parcels is you may subdivide that parcel off, give it back to open space, if there's somewhere in the town. And depending on the cost of the land too, you want to make sure that wherever you land, you want to make sure that you've got a site in a building or buildings. Again, maybe you stay on both of the existing sites, but you got to make sure that you've got some area to grow. Because, you don't want to go through a project at this point. We know the numbers are down. I have seen a few communities already that numbers are starting to trend upwards. So we've got a lot of, empty nesters and, it's a roller coaster is the way that the cycle of population goes. So, whatever the final decision is, as far as configurations, we just got to make sure that you provide yourself a way to expand the facility in the future if you need to do so.
Okay, so you're saying there's at least as a planning discussion, there's some prudency to looking at larger pieces, but realizing that the reimbursement won't cover the larger portion. The excess.
Correct. Right. And again, there's ways of subdividing those off potentially and giving it back to the town as open space. You know, so there's ways to try and maximize the state reimbursement as far as, you know, the real developable land. I mean, you don't want to be paying for, you know, if you got 20 or 22 acres of nice level developable property and you got another 20 acres of wetlands, you know, maybe that 20 acres of wetlands gets peeled off to an open space conservatory within the town.
Financially, that doesn't make a significant difference, though. Either way, you're going to take that property off the tax rolls.
Right.
Well, yeah, if it's not right, if it's not, as I stated, if it's privately owned land, then yeah, potentially it's on the tax rolls. Public land, yeah, and that's again, that's a great point, is you've got to take a look at what your tax impact would be. And then, you know, if the decision is made, you know, potentially to go to a new site with a new building, you know, what are the opportunities of the existing parcels to be turned back into some type of either residential or commercial development to regenerate some of the tax revenue.
Well, that option will only exist for one of them.
Right.
Center school property could go to four residential lots. With the current deed restrictions on Hall, it's going to stay off the tax rolls.
Catherine, is there any progress on the Hall Foundation contacts? Catherine, if you're saying anything, you're muted.
No,
No progress? Okay.
You'd mentioned you had a list and potentially with locations or map locations. Is that something that you can send to me so I can start digesting that list? And, you know, what we'd like to do is take that list and graphically, as you know, as Ralph pointed out, you know, pop on the police station, pop on your fire station, onto a map of the town, and then start labeling those parcels, whether it's numerically or whatever, around that. So you can see, you know, is it centrally located? How close is it to your emergency personnel? You know, that's a great metric to use for evaluating the sites. Then, you know, the next metric is it large enough and does it have enough flat developable area to support a school project?
This is Willington. We don't have much of that.
Most towns in Connecticut don't, believe me. It's, you know, anytime they do look to build a new school, it's a challenge. And it's, you know, it's why we end up doing at times a lot of new schools on existing sites and then tearing down the existing school.
So can I ask Scott, is this type of information something that typically the town provides you, and then you develop the list like you showed before? Is it something that a committee like this does independently, or is it something that you Colliers does?
Well, typically, you know, for the town-owned parcels and all, we would work with the town planner, you know, some resources in town, and potentially as you know, with this subgroup to get that information together. And then what we would do is help organize it into a way that we could help digest it and evaluate it, you know, put it into one of these grading formats to help assist you in you know, determining which parcel or parcels could be the most appropriate.
So that's good.
Okay, so can I ask that we have this? Can we have Colliers help us do that so that we don't, you know, I just think they could do it a lot quicker than we could sitting here, you know, brainstorming what the.
Yeah, I mean, absolutely. And I mean, and there's things on here, you know, like your phase 1 sites. You know, again, I think really till you go through sort of the initial review of properties. You don't want to go ahead and start spending a lot of money evaluating parcels that, ultimately you may not end up considering. So, you got to take a sort of a step-by-step approach here. Identify all the parcels, so you've done your diligence, and then, carve down that list, and then identify one or two that you may want to then start doing the phase one site environmentals and some of the background information with a little bit of a deeper dive.
So in other words, based on Gary's question and your answer, we may have gotten ourselves in a little deeper as the subcommittee than we needed to. I mean, our intent was that this would be the living document, but what it seems like is it makes more sense for us to feed you some initial information, either through town planning or zoning use office, and have you do this.
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, probably be more of maybe a little bit of the draft chart that I provided, and picking up on some of the, some of the criteria that you listed on this Excel spreadsheet. But yeah, no, that's our job is to, get the information from the town and then organize it and assist you in helping to make a decision.
Okay, well, to Gary,
Like I know you've got some
probably
some
more
parking-
efficient at it.
Right, you've got some parking across the street from Hall Memorial too. So,
Yeah.
I'm not sure how much that land is, but certainly, from a parking standpoint, that does alleviate a little bit of the pressure on the existing site. And depending on how much adjacent land is available, those are certainly factors that we want to make sure that we gather all that information.
Right.
I think this is a meeting where we have to be careful about talking about abutting land.
Right.
We're not in executive session here. This is a public
Right.
meeting.
Right. Okay, so based on what you're saying, Scott, I can get you, I'll take the list that Phil has. I'm not sure if I actually have it in my computer or if I had it in a link from Phil, but I'll find it anyway. I'll find the list from Phil. I'll check with our land use office and make sure it's accurate. It would be easier for them to just look at it and say, there's one or two changes. And I'll have them include the things you noted, the fire stations, things like that. That's easy. And then you're saying it makes sense to get that list to you and get you started. Is the committee, are the subcommittee members okay with taking that route?
I could sit down in an afternoon and come up with a list of private parcels that are undeveloped and sizable. I could put that list together in an afternoon. It's not that difficult. We could do it in a meeting, but apparently there's some who don't want to waste time on that stuff.
Well, I
There are, yes.
think, Ralph, I think you and I both have a pretty good grasp, and you even more so, of what those pieces are. And we do already have a list based on acreage. And so I think I can probably pull that and the other stuff that Scott Pellman talked about. I think I can pull that together pretty easily. And get it off to him.
I'm just plugging in some obvious things here. If you guys object, we can revisit, but
I'm enjoying seeing the form getting used, Catherine. This is good.
I mean, this is just some basic stuff. I mean, it's not anything cryptic. It's just, okay, so Hall School, for example, is there vehicle access? Yes. Site access? Yes. Utility, what? I'm not sure if it's septic or,
They're both septic.
okay.
So yes, it should not be there.
There's no utility sewers, so those won't be no, yeah.
And there's no gas.
Correct.
And then I'm not sure about the miles for fire services. I know for Center, I put less than 500 feet away. I don't know what it is for Hall. I didn't.
So the question that, if that's talking about water mains to supply a sprinkler system, both schools do have that. They do have water lines that could supply a sprinkler system. The difference being the one at Center School would have to supply a tank because it doesn't have the hydraulic capacity to run a sprinkler system. It's city water, if you will, but it's not at the high enough pressure and flow.
Right. I was actually thinking distance, per Ralph's comment about how close it is to,
Emergency services,
right.
right?
Well,
I
there's
think
t-
that's
there's-
different from being a utility.
Yeah, I'll go back up.
And there's two factors to that. There's distance to the source of emergency or first responders, and there's the roads to get to whatever facility we wind up considering. If we were to look at the town-owned property on Moose Meadow, that's not exactly an ideal location for prompt first responders. And Mike, you know that location. It's fine in the summer, but it's going to be horrible in the winter.
Agreed.
And we're not going to build roads to these schools.
Are both schools sprinklered, Mike?
No,
Either one of them sprinklered
no,
or just fire alarm?
fire alarms.
Okay, Catherine, define pedestrian circulation for Center School for me.
Sidewalks?
Said define what pedestrian circulation means for Center School.
Sidewalks.
Sidewalks.
Yeah.
We don't have any.
Yeah, there are.
Yeah,
Well,
to
they're
the
around
parking
the
lot.
building, but not down the street. So that's a good question, is what do these things mean?
What do they mean to Willington? I think is a better question, Mike.
Right.
Well, again, these are all taken from, the forms.
I
So-
understand, but nonetheless, we have sidewalks in South Willington, but the kids aren't allowed to walk to school. So what good do sidewalks do? That's
Yeah.
That's a school board decision.
Yeah, sidewalks are almost irrelevant at this point.
Well, let's not go down a rabbit hole. I understand the point, but, we're trying to use this as a tool here.
Well, then let's make it useful.
Well, I'll let you edit it, okay? I'll stop sharing.
No, you can.
No, that's okay.
I just want to see us get something accomplished.
We
Well,
all do. We all do,
I-
Ralph.
yeah, I think we're working on something. So based on Scott's recommendation, it seems like the prudent thing for us to do to be efficient is to get him some information. He will use his experience and his tools to start working on a list. No doubt he's going to come back to us with questions. That can be our next thing, is to answer some of his questions. Maybe that sets us on a path. By the time those couple of meetings happen, we should be hopefully in a condition weather-wise to be able to do some site walks.
We should be able to use, GIS, as you had noted already, mapping, just to take a look at initial topography and all. And, again, there may be some that have ledge or just topography that we're going to rule out real quick.
Right.
It's just going to be a scarlet letter on that parcel, and we're going to say, okay, we'll move on.
Right, and some of that, we have some of that wisdom available to us already, particularly with Ralph, because he is an engineer and he knows the town very well. And And then, you know, we had some value in that one parcel we looked at where we went out and walked it, and actually putting our eyes on it was a whole new, that was a step in understanding the property, because we took what we could from mapping and everything else. But then when we saw it in person, slopes that we saw in mapping that we thought were steep turned out in person to be quite as condemning for the property. So I
Yeah,
think
and we do live in Connecticut,
to
so,
get-
you know, you're, you know, finding a perfectly flat site in Connecticut is the needle in the haystack. I mean, it most likely doesn't exist. But there are opportunities as well, because you're talking about a pre-K through 8 school. And one of the interesting factors is when you're talking about the lower grades, pre-K through grades 1, anything that services that age range has to be on what's called the level of exit discharge. So those kids cannot traverse stairs. If there's an emergency, they need to be able to run out a door that gets directly onto grade. So we have seen school projects that you can actually, if you do have some slope, you can actually have at-grade access on the lower level. And you can also potentially, if it's built into a hill, have at-grade access on the upper level, which gives you the opportunity to, you know, put your media center potentially on a what would be a second floor. So just because a site has some topography doesn't necessarily mean it's not something you could take advantage of. And that, you know, potentially allows you to make the school a little bit more compact.
Yeah, I think we've hoped for information like that in some discussions before, that I think that Ralph and I have had between the two of us and have discussed in meetings to some extent, is how could we actually advantageously work with a slope? And maybe get the ability to compact the footprint a little bit and go a little more vertical. So we're using up a little less space, plus construction, you know, if you make whatever amount of thousands of square feet all on one level, that's that much more foundation and roof. Whereas if you can stack a building, you might actually have some savings in construction, either time or cost, by being able to have less footprint and more vertical.
Yeah, and it's a trade-off to the vertical circulation, elevators, staircases, and otherwise. So yeah, you've got to evaluate it.
And certainly heating and cooling a vertical building is a little easier than a giant horizontal building with every surface exposed to the weather. Okay, so okay,
So in terms of what we're going to get to Scott, Mike, maybe that's the next thing to think about. You know, what are these? We know Hall and Center are sites. We have that map. Scott, do you want all those town-owned parcels? Do you want, you know, is there?
Absolutely. Send me everything you have. You know, if you have town maps, you know, I went on the state website and looked what the state had listed for both Center Elementary and Hall. You know, the state on their records has 9 acres at Center and 15 acres at Hall. But the state's records, you know, are not always, I wouldn't live by those.
Right.
You know, they can be, and I have seen them be incorrect in the past. So, you know, even those, we want to make sure we want to verify and find out exactly what those parcels sizes are.
All right. Center School, by the way, is 8 acres, not 9. Hall School is a total of 14.9 acres.
Okay. Well, and again, I'm just, Ralph, noting what was on the state 050 website, what's filed with the state of Connecticut.
Okay.
So so case in point, you know, 14.9, 15, pretty close. 8 to 9, that's a big difference.
But I still think knowing what we need to provide for space, particularly exterior space. I'd asked Phil once what he wanted for parking, what he felt was appropriate for parking in a pre-K to 8, and he was saying 100 spaces. Well, that's not what the guidelines suggest. The guidelines for middle school put the number at around 50 spaces.
All right, so back to Gary's question of what information are we getting to Scott? Scott, we'll get you the information on the town-owned parcels the major municipal things like emergency services. And do you want the large parcels denoted on that also, the large private parcels denoted on that map?
If you have that list, if you want to provide those, again, like I said, we'll treat those a little bit more sensitively. Those
Of
would,
course.
I don't think we would place those on the same map where we would discuss publicly owned parcels.
Yeah, and then we may have to set up our meetings to have an executive session if we're going to talk about those, right?
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah, and at the same point, we're going to take a look at zoning regs. We're going to see what, some of these parcels are zoned for. Either way, you're going to need to do, if you do go to a different parcel, you're going to need an 824 referral
Yep.
from zoning and planning, to say that the proposed parcel is in line with your long-term plans. So, a lot of work, to pull this stuff together.
Even if you add on to an existing and reconfigure parking, you're still probably gonna have to have an 824 review.
Yeah, if there's any land purchase, yes, I would agree with that.
No, even if you just modify existing, you have to do an 824.
I didn't think,
Yeah, if there were
But you
adjacent
know it better
property
than I
lines
do.
and if you were codifying town-owned parcels, yes.
okay. So I think that covers the conversation about the matrix. Catherine, thank you for playing with that a little bit. I'm not ready to give up on that matrix yet, but I think we may have a path forward through Scott that is a much more efficient way to use everyone's time. So
And certainly, I think when you get down, potentially to final decisions, that more detailed matrix could actually be very useful. But I think, site is one component of the decision that you guys are going to have to make. You're going to have criteria that are educationally driven, facility driven.
right.
So all of those, so the site selection and what is the best site is going to need to be balanced with the other decisions that you're going to need to make.
Right. Okay. So my feeling, and anyone please feel free to speak up if they disagree. My feeling is that's as far as we can go with the discussion of town-owned parcels right now, because we're going to give that list to Scott. Does everyone agree in agreement there?
I
Okay.
think so.
Are we ready to move on to setting our next meeting? We probably, Scott, I need a couple of days to get that information to you. You probably need a few days to start working on that, right? So we should be looking out maybe a couple of weeks from now, 3 weeks from now. What's your recommendation?
Looking at my calendar here, let's see, we're on the 7th.
Right.
So the end of the week. Probably, best case might be sometime later the week of the 21st. 21st is a holiday. Not that I'm working, that's that's not an issue. But yeah, if we got it to, I think I need probably next week to get everything organized. So probably sometime week of the 21st. Best case.
Do you want to give a little buffer and maybe go for Monday, the 28th at 4 if people are available again?
That would be fine. Just check my long-term schedule here. Monday, the 28th at 4. I will, I'll block that out right now.
Is everyone else willing to commit to that date right now or not sure?
I will.
I could do that. Yeah, I could do that.
Okay. Catherine?
Yep, same here.
Okay. All right, so I move we set our next meeting date for 4 PM, Monday, February 28th. And we'll invite Scott back in again for that.
I'll second.
All right, hang on. Gotta go to a new page on my notes here. Okay,
Aye.
sorry. Any more discussion on that? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Can
Catherine,
we,
you're in. What's up?
can we add, can we talk about the agenda for that?
Of course. Yep, what do you want?
So what will the agenda
The
be?
motion passed, by the way. I'm sorry, the motion passed. Go ahead.
I was just gonna ask, what will the agenda be?
So I think land assessment, we can just land assessment with Colliers. Does that sound good?
We might leave open the potential for executive session depending on how far we go with the land parcels.
Yeah, might as well put it on there and we can always not do it if we don't need it.
Right, yep,
Yeah, exactly.
okay, got that.
Time of day for that meeting? Anyone have any preference?
That meeting, we said 4 PM.
Okay.
Catherine, do you have other stuff you want to see on the agenda?
Well, I was just, I guess the land assessment with Colliers, I think we'll cover it. I was just thinking if we had a list of town-owned properties that we could just discuss together
Yeah.
as a group to just, we know Hall, obviously, we know Center, but are there other potential town properties that we can just have a discussion about to see if they're gonna make our parcel evaluation list?
Yeah, so when I send that list to Scott, I'll send it to everyone on the subcommittee as well. And so when we come back to that meeting, we'll have that information and we'll talk about that. Does that make
Okay.
sense?
Yeah, if I can help on that, Mike, let me know.
Sure. Yeah, I'll keep you in mind, definitely. Okay. So it'll be land assessment discussion with Colliers, potential executive session, and then the usual stuff like set the date of the next meeting. Good?
And just, can I just ask a question about
Sure.
the present to speak? Is that typically just in the overall SBC meetings, or does it trickle into any of the subcommittee meetings?
I think we can do it in subcommittees, but I've noticed a lot of times subcommittees don't have present to speak only because any real action has to be taken up to the real committee.
I see, okay,
And then present to speak happens there. It's not that it can't be done.
yeah. Just curious, that makes sense. Thank
Yeah,
you.
we're not making any final decisions in subcommittee. We're just making recommendations up to the committee.
I think they'll, Mike, that it does present an interested party from speaking up if they choose to. Not that we're, with the understanding that no decisions are going to be made except in the full committee meeting.
So you're thinking that it probably doesn't hurt to have the extra option for public involvement?
I think having it, not needing it, is better than needing it or cutting people out from speaking if they want to hang out at our meeting.
Okay, that's a fair point. So
No,
I'll put to speak in there.
well, should we vote on that? Because I kind of agree with what you were saying that, we do give people 2 opportunities. So if there is something they want to say about the land subcommittee, they could always say it in the overall group too. I mean, I could go either way, but I think we should agree as a group.
Yeah, I don't see the need to vote for it, but I hear Ralph saying that you might as well just leave it on. If there is a case where you want to hear from somebody and there's, they attend and they really want to speak, I don't know why we would say no. I don't think we're setting an expectation that it's really an invitation for the public to come and deliver a lot of public comment. But if we need it, I think it's not bad to have. So I would go with that. And again, I don't think we need to vote on it unless you feel differently, Cap.
We have so far for suggested agenda items, land assessment with Colliers, potential executive session, and present to speak. I don't think we need motions for agenda items when we're not adding them to a meeting that's already happening.
I I agree.
Right. And I apologize, I have to leave, but thank you very much, Mike. And I'll see you next time.
Okay, anything else for the good of the order? Thank you, Gary. All right, then I
No,
think, go ahead.
No, I was just gonna say, I don't think I have anything, Mike, other than, you know, when you want to sit down and do this, let me know.
Yep,
I can start on the private ones if you want.
okay. All right, so can I get a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
I'll second. Everyone who's in favor, say aye, wave your hand, and thank you, Scott.
Aye.
Aye. All right,
care.
that's unanimous. Thank you, everyone.
All right.